Alien girl takes human to a fallen star, but human finds a second version of her inside. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The desert wind pressed against Ethan Cole's suit with a dry, electric hiss, carrying grains of metal sand that tapped against his visor like distant rain on glass. His scanner flickered again, struggling to hold a stable reading as pulses of violet light rose from the crater ahead. Soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. The fallen star wasn't a star at all, not in the way humans meant it. From a distance, it had looked like a cracked sphere, but up close Ethan saw strands of light sliding across its surface in slow, deliberate patterns, like veins beneath warm skin. It hummed through the soles of his boots, low enough that he felt it more than heard it. He tightened the strap on his pack, exhaled once, and stepped forward, following the shifting glow deeper into the crater. That was when he saw her again. Lyra Vess stood between two broken ridges of stone, her silhouette haloed by the violet radiance rising behind her. Her lavender skin reflected the light in soft gradients, and the faint breeze swept a few strands of silver hair across her face. She didn't move at first. She only watched him, quiet and unreadable, like someone guarding a memory instead of a secret. "You came anyway," she said, her voice carrying the smooth calm of someone who already knew the answer. Ethan stopped a few feet away. "Your message didn't exactly leave room for negotiation." A faint crease formed at the corner of Lyra's eyes. Almost a smile, almost not. She turned and motioned for him to follow. "Stay close. The ground shifts when it wants to." Ethan glanced down at the sand. It shimmered faintly, as if tiny currents flowed under the surface. Nothing about this place obeyed Earth logic. He matched his pace to hers. The deeper they moved, the stronger the light became, rising in slow waves that warmed the air. Ethan wiped a thin layer of dust from his wrist display. Temperature, 89 degrees Fahrenheit. The crater should have been cold at night, but the fallen star warmed everything within reach, as if it were alive and dreaming. Lyra placed a hand against a section of the sphere. The surface folded inward under her touch, opening like petals responding to sunlight. A soft rush of warm air pushed outward, scented faintly of ozone and something floral, something old. "After this point," Lyra said, glancing back at him, "you must not touch anything unless I tell you." "Not planning to," Ethan replied. She stepped inside. Ethan followed, ducking under the arching layer of light as it curved shut behind him with a muted thrum. Darkness swallowed them for a heartbeat. Then the interior lit in gentle pulses, violet, pale blue, then white, revealing a long corridor that seemed grown, not built, its walls smooth and warm like polished stone warmed under the sun. Ethan felt the air shift again, carrying a soft echo he couldn't place, something like a breath released just ahead of them. Lyra froze. Not from fear, more like recognition. Ethan lowered his voice. "What is that?" Lyra didn't answer immediately. Her eyes softened, distant. "It's why I brought you. And why I hesitated." Ethan took a step closer. The echo came again, gentle, slow, unmistakably alive. "Lyra," he whispered, "someone else is here." Lyra finally met his eyes, her voice barely audible. "Not someone. Not exactly." A final pulse of light swept across the corridor, and far ahead, just beyond the soft curve of the passage, Ethan saw the faint outline of another figure. Same height, same stance, same silver hair drifting in the warm current. A second Lyra, standing perfectly still, as if waiting for him. For a long moment Ethan stood completely still, the soft pulses of violet and blue light moving across the corridor walls like the slow rise and fall of a sleeping creature. Lyra remained beside him, her posture straight but her breath just slightly unsteady, as if she were preparing herself for a truth she had tried not to face. The figure ahead shifted with the same faint motion he had seen from Lyra earlier, a subtle adjustment of weight, a tilt of the head that carried familiarity in every line. Ethan felt the temperature rise slightly as they approached, the air warming against his faceplate before he lifted it off entirely. The interior atmosphere smelled faintly of something floral, almost like lavender carried on a warm breeze, and it steadied him enough to take another step. "Lyra," he whispered, though his voice sounded muted inside the living corridor. "She looks exactly like you." Lyra did not answer immediately. Her eyes reflected the corridor's soft glow and her fingers twitched at her side before she finally stepped forward, each footfall sending little ripples of light along the floor as if the structure were acknowledging her presence. Ethan followed closely. As they rounded the gentle curve of the passage, the second figure came into full view. She stood before a tall column of light that rose from floor to ceiling, her hands resting lightly at her sides. Her lavender skin shimmered with the same diffuse glow as the walls, as if she were connected to the star's energy in a way the real Lyra was not. Her silver hair floated slightly in the warm air, weightless, as though gravity bent differently around her. When her eyes lifted, Ethan felt a small shiver run up his spine. They were the same shape and color as Lyra's, but softer somehow, like a memory given form. Lyra stepped ahead of him, but slowed within just a few feet of her duplicate, her voice gentle. "You woke up." The second Lyra tilted her head, studying her with an expression that held neither surprise nor confusion. "You returned," she replied, her tone calm and warm, carrying no accusation, only recognition. Ethan glanced between them. "Is she conscious?" The second Lyra turned to him with a serene smile, the kind that seemed to radiate a quiet understanding. "I am conscious, though I am not a separate person in the way you mean. I am Lyra as she was, and as she might have been." Lyra's breath caught softly. Ethan heard it, even over the hum of the corridor. "Echo," she said quietly. The duplicate nodded. "A preserved imprint, designed to hold our people's memories and guide the next generation." But there was no next generation, only silence. Ethan tried to understand, piecing together the stray fragments of what Lyra had told him earlier. "So you are a memory that kept going?" Echo's gaze softened. "A memory that learned to wait." Lyra stepped a little closer, her hand rising before she caught herself and lowered it again. "Why did you activate?" Echo looked at Ethan with a warmth that felt almost like gratitude. "Because someone showed you compassion. That was enough for me to wake." Ethan felt his chest tighten, not in fear, but in something quieter, heavier. The air pulsed again, and Echo continued. "I sensed your conflict, Lyra. You feared that I would replace you. But existence is not a competition." Lyra lowered her eyes for a moment. "You were always the perfect version," she whispered. "I did not want him to see you." Echo smiled with extraordinary gentleness. "He sees you. That is why I am awake at all." Ethan swallowed, unsure what to say as both versions of Lyra turned toward him, the living corridor humming softly around them like an audience listening to the first breath of a truth finally spoken. Echo's words settled into the warm air, and for a moment Ethan felt as if the entire corridor paused to listen. The pulses of violet light slowed, drawing long, gentle shadows across the curved walls. Lyra stood very still, her silver hair brushing her shoulders as she exhaled softly, like she was letting go of a weight she had carried for far too long. Ethan took a cautious step forward, careful not to disturb the subtle glow under his boots. "If you are a memory," he asked Echo, "then why does it feel like you are more than that?" Echo turned toward him with a steady calm. "Because memories grow when given permission. When Lyra chose to come here instead of leaving her past behind, she allowed me to change as well." Ethan glanced at Lyra. She kept her gaze on the floor, her fingers curling slightly at her sides, the way someone does when they are trying not to reveal how deeply something affects them. "I was not sure if I wanted to face you," she admitted quietly. "The star chose to keep you." Echo replied, her voice warm, almost soothing. "That means you still matter. More than you believe." A faint hum moved through the structure, spreading along the walls in slow waves. Ethan felt it through the soles of his boots, a soft vibration that grew steadier, like a heartbeat syncing with theirs. Lyra lifted her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Echo, why did the star call for him? Why a human?" Echo's attention shifted to Ethan with an expression that held an unexpected depth, as if she could see something he could not. "Because he approached this place without fear, and without expectation. That combination is rare in any species." Ethan felt heat rise in his face, a quiet humility rather than embarrassment. I just wanted to understand what was happening, he murmured. Echo stepped closer, the warm air stirring slightly around her. Curiosity without domination is a kind of compassion. Lyra looked at Ethan then, her violet eyes reflecting the soft light. I did not know if you would come with me, she said. Most people avoid what they do not understand. You did not give me much choice, Ethan replied with a gentle smile. Lyra's expression softened, the corners of her eyes warming. You followed anyway. The corridor hummed again, higher this time, like a chime resonating through glass. Echo placed her palm against the glowing column behind her, and the light shifted from violet to a clear, pearly white. The warmth in the air deepened. It is beginning, Echo said. Ethan frowned slightly. What is beginning? Echo's eyes shimmered gently. The star is preparing to close itself again. It will sleep until it is called by compassion once more. Lyra stepped toward her double, her voice tightening with concern. What about you? Echo offered a calm smile. I will return to rest. That is my purpose. Ethan felt something shift inside him at the quiet acceptance in her voice, a sense of something beautiful and fragile about to fade. Is there anything you need from us? He asked. Echo looked between them, taking in both faces with the same softness. Only that you both remember this place, she said. A memory does not end when it is honored. It continues. It grows, just like I did. The light brightened gently around them, warm and alive, and for the first time Ethan realized the star was not closing because it was tired. It was closing because it trusted them to carry what it had held for so long. The soft, pearly light continued to rise around them, filling the corridor with a warmth that reminded Ethan of stepping into sunlight after a long winter. The air carried a gentle hum, steady and calm, as if the star itself were. Breathing slower, preparing for a long rest. Echo kept her palm on the column, and the light responded to her touch in smooth, fluid waves that rippled upward like water illuminated from within. Lyra watched her double with an expression Ethan had not seen before. It was not fear. It was not envy. It was something quieter, something almost tender, as if she were looking at a version of herself she was finally ready to understand. Ethan shifted slightly, careful to keep his movements soft, not wanting to disturb whatever delicate moment was unfolding between the two versions of Lyra. The temperature had risen to a comfortable warmth, maybe around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and the gentle current of air brushed against his face like a sigh. Echo slowly withdrew her hand from the column. The glow steadied, becoming less like breath and more like a heartbeat settling into sleep. The closure will begin soon, she said, her voice as calm as the light around her. Lyra stepped closer, her lavender skin catching the reflections of the shifting energy. When it closes, she asked softly, will I still remember you? Echo tilted her head with a faint, knowing smile. You already remember me. Memory does not fade simply because distance grows. Ethan felt the hum beneath his boots change slightly, a gradual deceleration, like the slowing of gears in a machine that was finally allowed to rest. Echo, Ethan said, taking a small step nearer. If you are returning to rest, does that mean we cannot speak to you again? Echo turned toward him with an expression that held both warmth and finality. You may not hear my voice again, she answered, but my influence remains with her. And through her, with you. Lyra glanced at Ethan then, her violet eyes carrying a flicker of vulnerability. She seemed to hold herself a little straighter, as if Echo's reassurance had settled something deep inside her. A soft vibration moved through the corridor, followed by a gentle shift of the air that reminded Ethan of a door preparing to close. Echo stepped toward Lyra, close enough that their reflections merged for a moment in the glowing floor. Do not fear what you are, Echo whispered. Your worth is not defined by perfection. It is defined by choice. Lyra's breath caught, but she nodded slowly. Ethan saw her shoulders ease, the tension she always carried beginning to dissolve. Echo then turned to Ethan. Take her out before the star closes. The path will guide you. As if responding to her words, the walls brightened with a soft trail of light leading back toward the entrance, each step illuminating just ahead of where they needed to walk. Ethan hesitated. It felt wrong to leave Echo standing there, so calm and solitary, as if she were choosing silence over existence. Will you be all right? He asked. Echo smiled, serene and sure. I am not ending. I am returning to what I was. A guardian of memory. Lyra reached out, her fingers hovering near Echo's hand, but not touching. Goodbye, she whispered. Not goodbye, Echo replied gently. Just rest. The light around Echo deepened into a warm glow, and the hum of the stars softened into something like a lullaby, low and steady, as if echoing through the corridors of a dream. Ethan touched Lyra's arm lightly. We should go. She nodded, taking one last look at her double before turning toward the glowing path. Together, they walked as the star began its slow, graceful descent into silence behind them. The glowing path guided Ethan and Lyra through the soft curves of the corridor, each step lighting just a moment before their feet touched the surface, as if the star were gently ushering them out. The hum beneath their boots had softened into a slow rhythm, like a distant heartbeat settling into rest. Ethan glanced back only once. Echo stood at the center of the chamber, her form illuminated by the warm, pearly glow that now wrapped around her like a cocoon of light. She did not move, but there was no sense of loneliness in her stillness. It felt more like she belonged to the star, the way a candle belongs to flame. The corridor grew narrower as they walked, the ceiling lowering by inches, the walls rounding closer, no longer expansive and vast, but intimate and warm, like the inside of a chest rising and falling with soft breaths. Lyra moved beside him in silence, her expression steady but thoughtful. The air carried a gentle lavender scent, faint but present, lingering like a memory that refused to disappear. After several quiet steps, she finally spoke. Ethan, she said softly, what did you see when you looked at her? Ethan hesitated. He knew she was not asking about Echo's appearance. She was asking about something deeper, something that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. I saw a part of you, Ethan answered honestly. A part you thought was missing. Lyra lowered her gaze. She is everything my people hoped we would be. Perfect memory. Perfect clarity. No fear. But fear is not a flaw, Ethan said. It is a sign you have something to lose. That means you are alive. Lyra looked up at him, her violet eyes catching the last reflections of the corridor's light. There was something fragile there, not weakness but honesty, the kind a person only reveals when they trust the one listening. The corridor widened again as they approached the entrance chamber, the air getting cooler, the glow dimming into soft blues. The sound of distant wind filtered through, muffled by the thick walls of the star. A faint vibration rippled under their feet, almost like a final exhale from the structure behind them. Ethan paused when the archway appeared ahead, the translucent shell that had opened for them earlier now shimmering with thin threads of light. Lyra stopped beside him. Once we step out, she said, her voice low, the star will close completely. No one will enter for a very long time. Then we honor it by leaving gently, Ethan said. Lyra looked at him with a small, quiet smile that felt like the beginning of something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. She placed her palm against the archway. The structure responded instantly, petals of light folding back with a soft whisper. Warm air rushed past them, followed by the cooler breath of the desert night. Ethan stepped through first, boots pressing into the metallic sand outside. The sky overhead had darkened into deep shades of blue and purple, and the crater glowed faintly beneath the thin starlight. Lyra joined him a moment later, turning back toward the archway. As soon as her hand dropped to her side, the entrance began to seal. The petals folded in reverse, each layer closing with a graceful sweep until the surface became whole again, smooth and seamless, as if it had never opened at all. A final pulse of light traveled across the sphere, gentle and warm, like a good-night whisper given to a trusted friend. Lyra watched it fade. Her shoulders rose and fell. Slowly, not with sorrow but with acceptance. Ethan stood beside her in silence, letting the cool wind settle around them. The star behind them fell quiet. The desert around them remained still. And for the first time since entering the fallen star, Lyra looked as though she understood exactly who she was. The night air settled around them with a calm that felt almost unreal after the warm pulse of the star's interior. Ethan watched as the surface of the fallen star dimmed, its last shimmer fading into a smooth, matte stillness. The crater returned to the quiet rhythm of desert wind sliding over metal sand, as if the world had simply paused to take a breath. Lyra stood a few feet away, her gaze fixed on the sealed sphere. Her silver hair drifted slightly in the cool breeze, catching moonlight in soft fragments. She looked peaceful, but Ethan sensed there was more moving beneath her expression, something she was still weighing, like a question she was not sure she deserved to ask. He stepped beside her. "You all right?" he asked gently. Lyra drew a slow breath. "Echo said I should not fear what I am," she murmured. "I thought I understood what that meant. I am not sure I do." Ethan kept his eyes on the horizon where the desert ridges met the deep blue sky. "You do not have to understand it all at once." The wind carried a soft rattle through the metallic grains around their boots. Lyra turned toward him slightly. "What did you feel?" she asked carefully, "when she looked at you?" He knew what she meant. Echo had looked at him with a calm certainty, like she could see the shape of his choices before he made them. "I felt seen," Ethan admitted, "but not in a way that made me forget who you are." Lyra's eyes flickered upward, meeting his. "That matters to you?" "Yes," Ethan said simply. A quiet moment passed, and then Lyra looked back at the star. "My people," she began, her voice soft but steady, "built Echo as a mirror, so we would never lose our history. But I always feared that the mirror was the better version, the one that stayed perfect while we changed." Ethan shook his head lightly. "Perfect does not grow. You do." Lyra studied him, as if she were measuring the weight of his words and the sincerity behind them. A faint warmth touched her expression, something almost like relief. "Echo said compassion awakened her," she said quietly, "and she believed it came from you." Ethan blinked, surprised. "Me?" Lyra nodded once. "You approached this place with curiosity, not fear. You helped me when you did not have to." That is not something Echo had seen in a long time. Ethan looked back at the sealed sphere, its surface smooth and unbroken. The idea that something ancient had responded to a simple human instinct, choosing to help rather than to judge, settled over him like a gentle weight. "Maybe it has been waiting for someone," Ethan said. "Or something," Lyra replied softly. She took a step closer to him, her expression open in a way it had not been earlier. "You asked Echo if she would be all right," Lyra said. "Most people would have been too overwhelmed to think about that." Ethan gave a small, almost embarrassed shrug. "It just felt right. It felt human," Lyra whispered. The wind stirred again, brushing her lavender skin with a cool shimmer. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with quiet wonder. "Ethan," she said, "my people believe compassion was a fragile thing. Rare. Easily lost." "It is not fragile," Ethan replied. "It is a choice." Lyra's eyes softened. "And you chose it without being asked." The crater went silent for a moment, the kind of silence that was not empty but full of everything they had seen, everything they carried, and everything that remained unspoken. When Lyra finally spoke again, her voice was low, almost hesitant. "Then what does that make you?" Ethan looked at her, the moonlight catching in her violet eyes. "Just human," he said. "But sometimes," Lyra whispered, "that seems like more than enough." The night deepened around the crater, the sky shifting into a deeper shade of blue that blended with the faint violet glow still lingering on Lyra's skin. Ethan checked his wrist display, though he already knew it was close to midnight. The temperature had dropped into the low 60s, but the air remained gentle, carrying the crisp scent of metal sand cooling under the moonlight. Lyra wrapped her arms loosely around herself, not from the cold, but from something more internal, something that stirred quietly beneath the surface of her composure. Ethan noticed. "Do you want to head back to the rover?" he asked. "We can warm up inside." Lyra shook her head. "Not yet. The silence feels different tonight." Ethan listened. She was right. The desert usually whispered with shifting sand, tiny grains sliding like distant static. But now there was a stillness that felt almost respectful, as if the land itself understood that something sacred had taken place inside the fallen star. Lyra looked up at him. "Ethan," she said softly, "there is something I should tell you." He turned toward her, waiting. "When Echo recognized you," she continued, "I felt something I did not expect. It was not jealousy. It was not fear. It was," she hesitated, searching for the right word. "It was hope." Ethan frowned slightly, more confused by the word than the emotion behind it. "Hope for what?" Lyra's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. "Hope that someone could see me the way the star saw me. Not as a perfect imprint, not as a relic of a lost people, but as a person who is allowed to change." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Lyra, You are not a relic. I thought I was, she whispered. For so long. A soft breeze brushed between them, carrying a trail of cool air that stirred her hair across her shoulder. Ethan watched the faint movement and sensed the shift in her posture. She seemed lighter, as if speaking the truth had loosened some invisible weight. What Echo said, Lyra continued, about compassion awakening her. It made me think about why I brought you here in the first place. Ethan blinked. You never explained that. Lyra stepped closer, close enough that the warmth of her skin softened the cool desert air. I was afraid of what I would find in the star, she admitted. Afraid the Echo was better than me. Afraid the Echo was the real me. So I needed someone who would not see me as a mistake. Ethan felt his voice catch for a moment. I would never see you that way. Lyra held his gaze, her violet eyes searching his face with quiet intensity. That is why I chose you, she said. You look at things not for what they are supposed to be, but for what they try to be. Ethan felt the words settle inside him with a heaviness that was not painful, just profound. A tremor of sound rose from the sealed star behind them, a soft low vibration like a long final exhale. Lyra turned toward it instinctively. The sphere glowed faintly, only for a moment, like the last shimmer of a dying ember. Then it faded completely. Ethan watched the light disappear. Is it over? He asked. Lyra nodded, though her voice carried a quiet reverence. It is resting, and it trusts us to carry what we saw. Ethan glanced at her. Do you trust me to carry it? Lyra looked back at him with a calm certainty that echoed her counterpart's final smile. Yes, she whispered, because you chose compassion when you had no reason to. The wind shifted again, warm this time, as if the desert had breathed life back into itself. Lyra took a small step toward Ethan, her voice softer than before. And that is why the star allowed you inside. Ethan held her gaze, the night pressing close around them. Something unspoken passed between them, something delicate, something quietly powerful. And then Lyra turned toward the path back to the rover, her voice a gentle invitation. Come with me, Ethan. There is more I want you to understand. The walk back toward the rover was slow, not because of the distance, but because the air around them seemed to carry a new weight, a quiet significance that neither of them wanted to interrupt. The desert floor glowed faintly under the moonlight, each grain of metallic sand catching the pale reflection like tiny mirrors scattered across the ground. Ethan kept his pace even with Lyra's, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin, a warmth that contrasted gently with the cool night air. Lyra glanced at him from time to time, as if making sure he was still there, still listening, still choosing to walk beside her. When they reached a small rise overlooking the crater, she paused and turned to face him fully. There is something I want you to see, she said, her voice soft but certain. Ethan followed her gaze as she lifted her hand. A faint shimmer appeared at her palm, a subtle glow that echoed the same pearly light of the fallen star. It flickered, delicate and unsteady, before settling into a gentle pulse. Ethan took a breath. Is that from the star? Lyra nodded. Echo transferred part of the memory lattice to me before she returned to rest. It is. Not her consciousness, just an imprint. A fragment of understanding. Ethan watched the glow move like a living echo of the star's heartbeat. Why give it to you? Because Echo believed I could carry it, Lyra replied. And because she believed you were someone I could share it with. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, not discomfort, but a quiet recognition of the trust placed in him. What does it show? He asked. Lyra lowered her hand slightly, letting the light spill across her fingers like water. It shows what my people once hoped for, and what they feared. Ethan stepped closer. Show me. Lyra extended her hand toward him. The light brightened, widening until it cast a soft circle around them, wrapping them in a warm radiance that contrasted the cool desert breeze. Within the glow, faint shapes appeared, shifting like silhouettes behind frosted glass. Ethan saw towering structures rising from a silver horizon, interconnected by delicate strands of light. He saw figures moving through the gleaming pathways, their lavender skin catching the glow in hues of violet and blue. Their movements were graceful, calm, purposeful. But then the images shifted. The light dimmed. The structures flickered. The silhouettes of Lyra's people began to blur. Lyra's voice softened. We depended so heavily on memory that we forgot how to adapt. We preserved our past so carefully that we stopped imagining a future. The images dissolved, leaving only the soft glow around them. Echo was created to safeguard what remained, Lyra said quietly. But she could not guide a people who would not evolve. That is why she waited. Ethan looked at her gently. Waited for what? Lyra met his gaze, a faint tremor in her breath. For someone who might remind us that change is not loss. That compassion is not weakness. That choosing to move forward is not the same as forgetting what came before. Ethan felt the full meaning settle into place. Lyra, she woke because of you. No, Lyra whispered. She woke because of us. The glow around them dimmed, folding back into her palm like a quiet sigh. Lyra closed her hand, letting the light fade. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind carried a thin stream of cool air between them, lifting a few strands of her silver hair across her cheek. Ethan gently brushed them back without thinking, and Lyra paused, not startled, not uncertain, simply present. Ethan, she said, her voice barely above the hush of the desert. Echo believed you were the turning point. Ethan swallowed. For what? Lyra held his gaze with calm clarity. For me. The glow that lingered across Lyra's palms slowly faded back into the quiet dark, leaving only the soft silver of moonlight brushing over her lavender skin. Ethan watched her close her hand gently, as though she were tucking away something fragile and precious, a memory she was choosing to protect rather than mourn. The desert around them had grown still, the kind of stillness that felt intentional, as if the land itself understood that whatever came next needed space to breathe. Lyra stepped closer to the edge of the rise, her gaze drifting back toward the sealed fallen star. It sat deep in the crater like a sleeping heart, its once vibrant glow now reduced to a faint shimmer under the moonlight. It feels strange, she murmured, to know that something so ancient trusted us with its final waking moment. Ethan stood beside her, his hands resting loosely at his sides. Maybe it was not a final moment, he said softly. Maybe it was a beginning for something else. Lyra tilted her head slightly, her silver hair catching a thin breeze. It did not choose me for that beginning, she said. Echo said it chose you. Ethan shook his head. It chose both of us. I just happened to be standing there when it needed someone to listen. Lyra turned to him, studying his face with a quiet intensity. You say things as though they are simple, she whispered. But nothing about tonight was simple. Ethan gave a small, almost shy smile. Maybe not. But the important parts feel clear. The wind shifted again, warmer this time, carrying the scent of metal sand cooling under the night sky. Lyra's expression softened. Ethan, she said, her voice gentle. Echo believed you were the turning point for me. But I think she was wrong. Ethan blinked, surprised. Wrong how? Lyra stepped closer. Not abruptly. Not hesitantly. Just naturally, as if some invisible distance between them had finally dissolved. You were a turning point, she said. But not because the star chose you. You were a turning point because you chose me. Ethan felt something gather in his chest, a mix of warmth and something deeper, something steady. I did choose you, he said quietly. Every step. Lyra looked down for a moment, as though letting the truth settle gently inside her. My people believed that purpose defined worth, she whispered. That perfection defined value. Echo showed me that memory is only half a life. The rest is choice. Ethan reached out, slow enough for her to see every inch of movement. When his hand touched her forearm, it was light, respectful, an affirmation rather than a request. Lyra did not pull away. Her skin was warm beneath his touch, subtly humming with the faint remnants of the star's energy. She looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting both the night sky and something softer, something newly discovered. Ethan, she whispered, I am not perfect. I am not the Echo. I am not what my people wanted me to be. Ethan shook his head gently. You are yourself. That is enough. Lyra exhaled, a slow breath that sounded like release, like acceptance, like the first moment of belonging she had allowed in a very long time. You say that as though you believe it, she murmured. I do, Ethan said. I always have. They stood together at the edge of the crater, the moon rising higher, the desert settling deeper into its quiet rhythm. Far below, the fallen star gave one final faint pulse, soft, warm, almost like a nod of approval, before fading completely into stillness. Lyra watched the last shimmer disappear, then leaned ever so slightly toward Ethan, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind. "Then maybe," she said, "being enough is the start of everything." Ethan looked at her, his voice calm, steady, certain. "For us," he said, "it is." The night held them gently, the silence full of meaning, the stars reflected in her eyes at last, looking almost human.